They say you should never ignore the signs. I've come to believe that's true. Only most of the time, you don't realize a warning until it's already too late. It started with a letter, not an email or a text. A real, handwritten letter. Who even sends those anymore? The envelope was a pale gray, almost brittle, like parchment kept too long in a box of old memories. No return address. My name written in elegant, archaic script. Inside, just a single sentence. Come home before the shadows claim what's left of you. There was no signature, no explanation, but something about the handwriting. It felt familiar, and the word home triggered a deep, almost instinctual dread. I hadn't been back to Greystone Hollow in over 20 years. Greystone was the place I grew up, a small, forest-surrounded town that seemed more legend than map. My parents died there when I was 10. Car crash, they said. My memory of that time is shattered glass, bits and pieces I can't fit together. I left the town the day after their funeral, sent to live with an aunt in Chicago. I never went back, never even drove near the state border. Until that letter. I don't know why I went. Curiosity? Guilt? The hope that someone remembered me? Maybe it was just the lure of the unexplained. Whatever it was, I packed a bag the next day and drove for 11 hours straight. The closer I got, the darker the sky grew, as if the sun itself refused to shine on Greystone. The forest thickened, gnarled trees arching over the road like claws. No birds, no wind, just a silence so heavy it pressed against the car windows. I arrived at dusk. The town looked the same, yet drained. Shops boarded up, no people on the streets. The only sound was the rustling of dry leaves. Then I saw it, my childhood home. The house stood at the end of Ashmore Lane, a crooked path half swallowed by vines. It hadn't aged well. The once white paint peeled in long strips. Windows stared blankly, like empty eye sockets. But the door was wide open, as if expecting me. And so, like a fool, I entered. The smell hit me first. Dust, mildew, and something else. Coppery, metallic. The air was thick, hard to breathe. The furniture was still there. The old leather chair, my mother's piano, the cracked coffee table where my father used to leave his whiskey glass. On the table was a second note. Same handwriting. Upstairs. The room you forgot. I nearly turned and left. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But my legs moved on their own. The staircase creaked under my weight. The walls seemed to close in with every step. I reached the landing and turned toward my old bedroom. It was empty, just dust and broken toys. Then I remembered. There was a second room, a locked one. My parents said it was the guest room, but no guest ever stayed there. I never saw it open. But now, the door stood ajar. Inside, the room was immaculate. Not a speck of dust. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, flickering. On the bed sat a woman in a long black dress, her hair covering her face. I froze. She slowly raised her head. Her eyes were mine. She smiled, and the walls began to bleed. The road to Mark's cabin was long and winding, cutting through dense forest. As we drove deeper into the Appalachians, the trees seemed to close in around us, their branches twisted like skeletal hands reaching for the sky. The air grew thicker, colder, and the sound of our tires on the gravel road was the only thing that broke the heavy silence. When we finally arrived at the cabin, the first thing that struck me was how isolated it seemed. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and the only light visible was the weak glow from the cabin's windows. It was as though the world had forgotten this place existed, and perhaps that was how Mark liked it. The cabin was old, but well kept, nestled at the edge of a small clearing, surrounded by tall trees. Its wooden exterior had the kind of charm that only age could bestow, the kind you'd find in those old postcards people send from remote mountain retreats. The porch creaked as I stepped out of the car, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "I know it's rustic, but it's cozy," Mark said, looking at me with a wide grin as he grabbed his bag from the trunk. "You'll see, I promise. It's the perfect place to disconnect for a few days." I wasn't so sure. The place had an unsettling stillness to it, like it had been forgotten by time, left to decay in solitude. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows as we unpacked our things. I followed Mark inside, but something tugged at my mind. There was no one else around. No neighbors, no sounds of life, nothing but the cold, oppressive forest. Inside, the cabin was just as charming as Mark had promised, with its stone fireplace, antique furniture, and low beams. But even as we settled in, I couldn't shake the unease that had settled in my chest. It was hard to pinpoint, but I felt as though something, or someone, was watching us from the shadows. And Mark poured us both drinks from a bottle of whiskey he'd brought along and put some music on to try and break the tension. The crackle of vinyl filled the room, but even that couldn't ease the heavy feeling I had. The house felt lived in, but not in the comfortable way you expect a vacation cabin to feel. The furniture was well maintained, but there were remnants of previous occupants everywhere. Dusty books on the shelves, half-finished puzzles, old photos in frames. We ate dinner, talked about old times, but it all felt forced, like we were both pretending that everything was fine. The lights flickered several times throughout the night, and I swore I heard something moving outside. Footsteps, maybe, or the rustling of leaves. Mark laughed it off, attributing it to the wind, but I wasn't so sure. The night was thick with silence after we retired to our rooms. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, and despite the warmth of the fire, I couldn't get comfortable. My room was small, furnished with only a bed, a nightstand, and an old wardrobe. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, hearing the creaking of the cabin's timbers as if it were settling, or maybe protesting against the wind. Finally, I fell asleep, but my dreams were strange. Vivid images of faces half hidden in shadow, whispering words I couldn't understand. I woke up once, heart racing, sweat on my skin, convinced someone was in the room with me. But when I turned on the light, there was no one there, just the same empty room. I told myself it was just my imagination, that the isolation was getting to me. The next morning, Mark was already up, making coffee. He greeted me with a cheerful smile, but there was something about the way his eyes darted around the room that made me uneasy. "You slept okay?" he asked, his voice too bright. "Yeah, fine. Just odd dreams." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he poured us both mugs of coffee and took a sip. "I've noticed weird stuff around here too," he admitted. "Not often, but sometimes. I think the house has a history." That got my attention. "What do you mean?" Mark glanced around, as if checking to make sure no one else was listening. "I don't want to freak you out, but, well, the place has been in my family for generations, and every now and then, there are rumors about it. people saying strange things happen, that it's cursed. I laughed, trying to make light of it. Come on, Mark. You're not seriously telling me you believe in that stuff, are you? He hesitated, his fingers gripping the edge of his mug. No, of course not. But there's always something off about this place. The way it feels, like it's been waiting for someone to come back. Sometimes, when I'm here alone, I feel like I'm not alone. Like there's someone else in the house with me. I was about to make a joke, but then I saw the look on his face. He wasn't joking. There was genuine fear in his eyes, and it made me feel cold all over again. Before I could say anything, we heard a loud noise from upstairs, a crash, followed by a series of thumps. My heart skipped. Mark's face went pale. He stood up quickly, grabbing a flashlight from the counter. "Stay here," he said, his voice tight. "I'll go check it out." "Are you serious?" I asked, suddenly panicked. "What if someone's in the house?" "I don't think anyone's in here," he said, but the uncertainty in his voice made me question it. He hesitated again, clearly torn, but then nodded and turned to go upstairs. I stood there for a moment, staring at the stairs, and a chill ran down my spine. I wanted to follow him, but I didn't. There was something about the way Mark had looked at me, as if he were trying to protect me from something he couldn't explain. Minutes later, Mark returned, his face ashen. "There's nothing there," he said, but his voice trembled. "Just some things knocked over. Nothing to worry about." But it didn't feel like nothing to worry about. The air was thick with something else, something unspoken. I could feel it in my bones, the weight of whatever it was that lingered in the dark corners of the house. That night, as we sat by the fire, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting, and I was beginning to fear that I wasn't just imagining it. The days that followed only deepened the unease I had felt the moment I arrived. The air around the cabin was thick, like the forest was holding its breath, waiting. At night, the wind picked up, howling through the trees and rattling the windows. But it wasn't the wind that kept me awake. It was the whispers. I first heard them 2 nights ago, soft, barely audible murmurs that seemed to come from the walls. At first, I thought it was the old wood settling, the house groaning under the weight of its years. But the whispers didn't stop. They became clearer, more distinct. "Come closer." I wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. I would sit up, trying to shake off the feeling of something watching me, waiting for me to fall asleep again. But when I turned the light on, the room would be empty. The only sound, the crackling of the fire. Mark seemed unaware of the disturbances. He had his own ways of coping, throwing himself into the cabin's upkeep. But as the days wore on, I noticed that he was becoming more withdrawn. His eyes grew hollow, his once bright smile replaced with a thin, strained line. It was as if he was trying to outrun something he couldn't escape. One evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, I decided to investigate the source of the whispers. Mark was out chopping wood, and the cabin was silent except for the wind. I stood in the middle of the living room, straining my ears. There it was again, a soft murmur coming from the walls. I followed the sound, my heart racing in my chest. It led me to the back of the cabin, where a narrow staircase descended into the basement. I froze at the top, the darkness below, swallowing the light from the open door. No, Someone was down there. The whispers grew louder, almost frantic. Come closer. I took a deep breath and stepped onto the first step, my feet heavy with dread. Each step creaked beneath me, the noise echoing in the silence. The air down there was cold, stifling. The stairs led into a small, dimly lit room. There, in the center of the room, stood a cracked mirror. The reflection was wrong. The figure in the mirror wasn't mine. It was a pale, gaunt version of me, with eyes hollow and dark, a twisted smile stretching across its face. I recoiled, stumbling back in shock. The figure in the mirror mimicked my movements, its smile widening. Come closer. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back upstairs, my breath ragged, my hands shaking. I had to get out. This place was not just haunted, it was alive. The next morning, I could barely look Mark in the eye. I didn't want to tell him what had happened. I didn't want him to know that I was losing my mind. But as I sat there, trying to act normal, I realized that I wasn't the only one who was afraid. There was something wrong with him too. He hadn't been the same since we arrived. I decided to confront him. Mark, I said, my voice trembling, there's something in this house. I don't know what it is, but it's not just the wind. It's alive. Mark looked at me, his face pale. He opened his mouth to say something, but then hesitated. The words didn't come. Mark, please, I urged. What's going on here? What's in this house? Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted you to find out. I thought I could keep it hidden, but now it's too late. He looked at me, his eyes filled with regret. This place has a history. My family, they were involved in something dark, something I can't explain. I didn't believe in it at first, but I've seen things I can't ignore anymore. My heart raced. What kind of things? Mark's face twisted in pain. The house isn't just haunted. It's a prison for something ancient, something evil. I didn't think it would come after you, but now that you're here, it's awake. Before I could ask more, the ground shook beneath our feet. A loud crash echoed through the cabin, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming from the stairs. My heart skipped a beat. I grabbed Mark's arm. What the hell is that? He didn't answer. His eyes were wide with terror. The footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs. Then, a slow, deliberate knock came from the door. Knock, knock, knock. I backed away, fear flooding my veins. The whisper started again, this time louder, more insistent. Come closer. We were trapped. I knew then that leaving wasn't an option. The house had claimed us, and we were too far gone to escape. The knock came again, and this time, the door creaked open on its own. Mark and I stood frozen, unable to move as the figure in the doorway stepped inside. It wasn't human. Its body was tall and thin, like a shadow made flesh, its limbs unnaturally long. Its face was a black void. No eyes, no mouth, just darkness. And from that darkness, a voice whispered, not from its mouth, but from all around us. You should have never come back. The air grew colder, the room suffocating with a weight I couldn't explain. Mark trembled beside me, his face pale, his body rigid with fear. I turned to him, my voice desperate. Mark, we need to run. Now. But Mark didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the shadow, a look of acceptance in his eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I thought I could protect you, but it's too late. It's too late for both of us. I grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the door. But he wouldn't budge. The shadow reached out, its long, skeletal fingers curling around Mark's wrist. "No!" I screamed, trying to pull him free, but it was useless. Mark's body went limp, his eyes wide with terror, as the shadow pulled him into the darkness. I ran. I didn't look back. The wind howled outside as I fled through the trees. But I didn't stop. The shadows were closing in, and I knew that if I stopped, I would become one with them. Hours passed, maybe days. I couldn't tell. I found myself standing on the edge of the clearing, staring back at the cabin. It was gone. The house, the woods, everything was gone. The only thing left was the blackness, swallowing everything in its wake. And then I heard the whisper again, "Come closer." I took one last look at the empty space where the cabin had stood, and I realized with a cold, sinking feeling that I was never leaving.